Today, as my tour of duty ends, the outstanding provisions of the peace agreement required to be fulfilled to conclude the political transition by February 2023 remain stuck. And no matter how you look at it, time is running out. Regrettably, the parties to the revitalized agreement have not managed to build enough trust to facilitate the implementation process, as they continue to demonstrate, indeed, a lack of political will, necessary to implement critical reforms as required by the agreement. And amongst all the unfinished business in terms of the reforms that the signatories themselves agreed to, 3 issues are now of utmost importance. South Sudan, this is number 1, still lacks a unified professional military and willing and capable to serve and protect its population. The country has really run out of excuses and justifications to further delay the graduation and deployment of the necessary unified forces across the country. 2, in order to be able to organize credible elections, South Sudan has yet to pass critical legislation in keeping with the revitalized peace agreement's timetable. And 3, the continuing boycott by SPLM-IO of the TNLA over the passage of the Political Parties Act is not helpful at all. However, what makes it even worse is that instead of joining forces to discuss and solve the problem, the TNLA has decided to continue approving bills without the opposition. Now, this may be legally possible, but it sure goes against the spirit of cooperation among the parties as stipulated in the peace agreement. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm really sad to be leaving South Sudan at a time when lack of political space and civil liberties remain the biggest threats to democratization. I cannot imagine how elections can help the country forward if people are not allowed to freely debate how they want to shape their future. The heavy-handed reaction to any kind of criticism, to me, looks like the government is somehow fearing its own citizens. To give you an example, I keenly followed the debate on dredging and water management recently and learned that international agreements were signed and kept secret. Also, government officials were calling critics of the plans to dredge rivers and dig canals criminals. Such behavior, ladies and gentlemen, to me, sounds detrimental to building trust and confidence between a government and its population. The transition period is nearing an end, and so the question of how this final phase will be handled is very important. And we know that the government is working to present a roadmap. This in itself is a good thing. We just want to remind the parties to the revitalized peace agreement that the question of what happens in the final stages of the transition is not an issue for the government alone. The Partners Forum welcomes the announcements on the draft roadmap, and we really hope that the follow-up to this will be handled in the spirit of the peace agreement. It is our desire to see that the due process is followed by opening up to all stakeholders, including civil society and all opposition groups within and outside of the country. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to say a few words on the problems regarding the financial support to the monitoring mechanisms RJMAC and CITESAM. Now, we all know that they are facing difficulties because of the suspension of support by the United States. I have seen that many players, including parties to the peace agreement, have openly asked the US to reconsider their decision. Now, I will not speak on behalf of my US colleagues. They are more than capable of doing that for themselves. However, as an ambassador of a mission with substantial development budgets, I frequently have to take decisions on where these budgets are to be invested. And the most important factor in that process is impact. So it is not about the activities that matter most. It is the way in which the results of those activities change the lives of people. Looking at the monitoring mechanisms, from that angle, the picture looks very bleak. Reports, conclusions, and recommendations of the mechanisms are mostly ignored, and I have witnessed occasions where important signatories to the peace agreement did not even bother to turn up at plenary meetings like this. Now, can we blame RJMAC and CITESAM for that? Certainly not. But since funding is supposed to deliver impact, the question on whether or not to support the monitoring mechanisms financially is really not an easy one. The Partners Forum fully supports the goals and objectives of the monitoring mechanisms. They are part and parcel of the IGAD-supported peace process and have very important roles to play. We understand that the suspension of support by the US has serious repercussions, but we are still largely in the dark with regard to what these repercussions actually are. What are the activities that can continue, and what are the activities that have to be stopped? So we call upon both our JMAC and CITESAM to present clear contingency plans and financial overviews. If the IPF members would be asked today to consider joining a discussion to see how the present problem could be solved, I'm convinced that it would be of great help to see that the conclusions and recommendations that these mechanisms produce are indeed taken seriously and acted upon. Until now, unfortunately, we have seen very little of that. I sincerely wish you and the people of this country all the best. I see you again soon, and I thank you very much for your attention.